Hello, dear ones. Welcome to our 234th online gathering for faith leaders across the country called Creating Beloved Community. This regular gathering is sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I am Jason O'Neill. I use any and all pronouns, and I'm honored to be one of your facilitators today.
And I'm Solveig Nilsson Gooden, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm your other facilitator, as you know. And in attunement with the Truth and Healing movement of the ELCA, and moving toward right relationship with our Indigenous siblings and neighbors, we'll begin with land acknowledgement. We are gathered together from all parts of Turtle Island, also referred to as North America. We are connected by the breath given us by the breath maker and by the very piece of Mother Earth, the land that each of us inhabits today. We understand that all land is Indigenous land, and we invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations whose lands you occupy now. We acknowledge the terror of colonialism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, broken treaties, stolen land, forced removal, and boarding schools, as well as the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and children each year, and the ripple effects of violence still being experienced today. We know that Indigenous peoples are not historical subjects, but are part of our communities. They offer invaluable wisdom for how we exist in relationship with Mother Earth, as well as our human and non-human neighbors. And I'm just going to add one more thing to this. Just in conversation with an Indigenous woman this past week, naming that that Native peoples are getting swept up in the ice sweeps because they look Latino, and so just to realize that the terror is deeply and widely felt in Indigenous community, and I was okay. Sorry, I'm just adding a little bit to this. Is that okay? I was in conversation with her, inviting her support for some land return possibilities that we have here in the Oregon Synod, which is awesome and exciting. And she was really clear to just to really name that any conversation that we have, any work that we're doing, land return, whatever it might be, we have to be aware of this context that Native people are also being terrorized. I mean, they are and have been, like, on a continual basis, but specifically around ice sweeps, because they don't know any, they don't care. They don't know and they don't care. Right. So just want to name that as part of the context also.
Yeah, thank you, Solveig. So it's also important for us to offer a labor acknowledgement. With permission granted from Dr. Tara T.J. Stewart, we acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants, who suffered the horror of transatlantic trafficking, slavery, and Jim Crow laws. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today. Stop my sharing for a moment. Another vital part of creating beloved community is fostering a sense of belonging. So we also invite you to update your name in Zoom to include your pronouns. This is just one more way we can express welcome for all of God's children. And at any point during these gatherings, you may access captions options in the Zoom menu on your device. It might also show as an icon with the letters CC in a box, or you may need to click on three little dots or swipe to a different screen within Zoom to access this option.
So we continue our work toward healing and justice by entering into a place of peace and listening together. Through these gatherings, we've developed a covenant of how we enter and interact in this space. We're committed to creating a safer and braver space where each of us are able to bring the truth of who we are and how we're doing. If you share something today that you wish for us to edit out of the recording, just let us know afterwards, or let Jason know in particular. And if you share something today that you, and with all of this said, we affirm these conversations are meant to be an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ, as the beloved community.
And as Bell Hooks wrote in All About Love, rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. Today and every second Wednesday of 2025, we will journey with Indigenous author Vine Deloria Jr. and engage with Custer Died for Your Sins, an Indian manifesto. A reminder about our journey together. We are all learning from this Indigenous elder through his writing. So Solveig and I are not teaching. We are just facilitators in this space.
And again, we'll begin our reading circle with this context from the last paragraph of the preface. But the Indian task of keeping an informed public available to assist the tribes in their efforts to survive is never ending. And so the central message of this book, that Indians are alive, have certain dreams of their own, and are being overrun by the ignorance and the mistaken, misdirected efforts of those who would help them, can never be repeated too often. And so each month we just remind ourselves of the covenant that we have about how we want to show up in this space. And so today, as every month, we invite people to share both from our heads and our hearts, and actually not separately, but together. Heart-centered thinking. We invite us into today. We want to practice awareness of space and time. We're not a huge group, and yet we want to just be aware of if we're noticing that we're being a little quiet today, to maybe challenge ourselves to listen and say, okay, what is something that I can offer as a gift to this group of my own perspective? Or if we're finding ourselves speaking up a lot, wondering, whose voice haven't I heard? And maybe I can invite another voice into the circle. And also, finally, we are always learning. That's the point. So this is a place where we can say the awkward thing, and in the learning process. So does that feel good for a starting place again today? Okay. So as has been our practice, we're going to take 5 minutes and invite you to type into the chat quotes from the chapter along with the page numbers. And then in about 5 minutes, we'll start reading those aloud, and they'll be the basis, the beginning basis for our conversation today.
Maybe I'll start reading. Does that sound okay while folks are still typing? Okay. So two references to page 167. Um, Humor, all Indians will agree, is the cement by which the coming Indian movement is held together. When a people can laugh at themselves and laugh at others and hold all aspects of life together without letting anybody drive them to extremes, then it seems to me that the people can survive. Page 146. One of the best ways to understand a people is to know what makes them laugh. Laughter encompasses the limits of the soul. In humor, life is redefined and accepted. The cartoon described on page 148, a flying saucer landing while an Indian watched. The caption was, "Oh no, not again." Page 148 as well. Under the covenants of the Old Testament, breaking a covenant called for a blood sacrifice for atonement. Custer was the blood sacrifice for the United States, breaking the Sioux Treaty. Back to page 147. For centuries before the white invasion, teasing was a method of control of social situations by Indian people. This is not a direct quote, but I appreciate the role of humor as a way to build social bonds and resilience that is reinforced in this chapter. I found this to be true for families and communities experiencing grief as well. An interesting tie for me to realize is true. Page 148, Columbus and Custer jokes are the best for penetration into the heart of the matter, however. Page 155, the current joke is that a survey was taken and only 15% of the Indians thought the United States should get out of Vietnam. 85% thought they should get out of America. Page 161, Chief, I sure wish I had your appetite. I don't doubt it, white man, the chief said. You took my land, you took my mountains and streams, you took my salmon and my buffalo, you took everything I had except my appetite, and now you want that. Aren't you ever going to be satisfied? Um, Referring to pages 154 and 155, I can remember my dad telling us a version of the Falling Rocks story. And page 152, the old chief asked the missionary where he was going, to heaven. Then I'll go to hell, intent on having peace in the world to come, if not in this world. Thank you all. Where do we want to start?
At the beginning,
Let's start at the very beginning.
That's a very good place to start, Mukesh.
Well, I think we recognize humor as healing. And I think it's interesting that before white men, the indigenous people recognized the role of humor in their society.
Mhm.
I was struck now. It's not that white people are humorless, but kind of, right? And it's very difficult to be trusting of humor, I think, among white people, because it's so used to harm. So I think there's a lot here to unpack culturally.
To just tag on to that, Solveig, I appreciate you naming that, because that word teasing tripped me up every single time. I don't know if it did other people, but someone who was often a target of teasing and bullying, because people read pretty quickly, that one's not going to push back on me. She's too nice. You know what? Do it to Jill Beverly now, people. Anyway, but that it was almost like trauma response is too big of a descriptor, but it made me trip every time, because I have negative connotations. And so to read about how they would use that to make a point, but be kind of gentle. And you know what I mean? It was like a finesse almost, and didn't bring my white person's experience on that word.
Mhm.
If I can, did I describe that okay?
I think so. I mean, what I heard from both of you, like connecting so like that humor, that a lot of white people use humor to harm. I felt also like use teasing to harm, where the teasing through the indigenous lens wasn't to harm. It was a way of connecting. And so it was not teasing how we know teasing, or at least I should say how I know teasing, or it was almost like bullying light.
Was even to avoid the harm as well.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to embarrass them in public, so I
Hmm.
teased them.
Hmm. Yeah, that kind of feels opposite.
I was teased by my brothers, not for being nice, but to watch me explode, which they thought was funny, which made me explode more.
I think it's interesting that because I feel sort of like while they would tease each other to be gentle, I feel like the jokes, the Custer jokes and the Bureau of Indian Affairs jokes and stuff is sort of to needle the white people, which we deserve, you know. So it's kind of uh, if somebody, I'm trying to envision myself if somebody would make some of the jokes that were more close hitting,
Mm.
how if that would make me feel uncomfortable. Like the Columbus jokes I think are funny. Like he had four ships and one of them fell off the edge. That's just funny. But like some of them I wonder if I would be uncomfortable with, which might be the appropriate response.
Mm.
So, two thoughts for me. Um, Talking about humor, I think it is identified here within our small group here. Humor can help, and humor can hurt. So, in the context and intention of the humorist, if you will, it will be one thought. Because I know of people, and in my experience, people will say things like, "Oh, that was only a joke," but in deep, it was really to hurt you or to
Mhm.
offend you some way. But they just say it as a joke. And so, how do you put that in context? But to my fellow brother and sisters, Martin Luther once said, "If God does not have a sense of humor, he does not want to get into heaven." That should help Lutherans to laugh a little more in worship, I think, instead of just being that. And what I usually do, at least I think I'm a humorous person, right? Because we start with the beginning, right? I mean, where else could you start but the beginning? I usually try to share a light side story before I share my message every Sunday. So I thought I'd share that.
And the type of laughter that's healing is not the type of laughter that is a jab. It is genuine guttural laughter kind of thing. So from that perspective, and you can fake it till you make it, but that still is healing. So I think that was where my context of laughter was coming from.
Mhm.
And I really do wonder how much that humor helped with the grief. I'm thinking back to journeying with a family whose 22-year-old developed bacterial meningitis and became brain dead and became an organ donor. And I was with the family through this whole process. There was a point at which I happened to know this individual as well. There was a point where we just started sharing funny stories about this young person and got to laughing so loudly that there were care staff in the hallway that came in to make sure that everything was okay because they knew what was happening with this patient. And what they were hearing was a complete mismatch. And I remember one in particular almost admonishing the family for laughing too much. And I took that person out in the hallway and we had a conversation about healthy grief. And that healing, that laughter and humor can be very healing. And it also, I didn't realize it at the time, but now I have extra support in saying it also reinforces bonds that we have, social bonds.
Yeah.
And that's really the big thing that kept coming back to me in this chapter.
So I wonder again, because of how we think and our perception, you use the word mismatch, but was it really a mismatch, or was it the way we are dealing with the situation in a humorous way? That would be the place and time that we are doing this because of that.
Hmm.
So out of term here, that's one of the reasons I love to be part of this meeting as possible, because this is obviously, for me at least, a great learning experience by sharing all of these wonderful thoughts. So I just want to lift that up.
Agreed. As long, and also along with what you were saying, Jill, on the role of laughter in the grieving process, that quote that you put up there, Jason, on page 146. The last line is, in humor, life is redefined and accepted. Like, wow. Like, let's just like soak that in for a minute here. Life is redefined and accepted through humor. That is powerful medicine.
Yeah. I'm hoping this is not out of term, and hopefully in line with our topic. As a former Hindu, there is a sect of Hinduism where when a child is born, there is mourning within the family. When someone dies, there is celebration, lots of joke and lots of celebration, drinking and dancing and celebrating. And the reason being is they're saying a child is coming into this sinful world, and they are just kind of mourning that this is what they're going to have to face, while where they're leaving, they're getting back into the spiritual world, if you will. That's the reasoning for that.
Makes sense to me. The world's hard.
Well, and that, Mukesh, like just the couple lines earlier on that same quote that Jason put in there, one of the best ways to understand a people is to know what makes them laugh. Like, you just taught me something about that particular group of people, right? That I now have like a whole sense of like a worldview because I know what makes them laugh or when they laugh, right? And laughter encompasses the limits of the soul. It's like, and I feel like it's like an intuitive knowing that we get with people, like when we hear them laugh and we sort of like, oh wow, you're laughing at that, or gosh, they can laugh at themselves. That, you know what I mean? It's like I intuit that somebody is safer if they can laugh at themselves. And if they're only laughing at other people, like, yeah, not safe, safe person, right? So it's like it's like opening up like all these things that humor can teach us, culturally and interpersonally.
And in line of coaching, it allows us to be good coaches, if you will, by asking these probing questions as to know who we are having communication and relationship with. In other words, why are you laughing? So tell me more. That's why I love about coaching, because there are always opportunities to apply these skills of listening and attentive, powerful questions. And I'm finding I'm myself talking a lot, so I'm thinking of my grandmother who usually be quiet.
If I may, Mukesh, I have a student in one of my coach classes right now. She often calls it the gift of shut up. And she actually turns 85 this week, which I think is amazing. That's what she says all the time in when we talk in class about like silence and coaching. She's like, I just keep reminding myself of the gift of shut up.
Jason, we so need to put that on a t-shirt, right? We just do. Jason and I are going to quit our jobs and start a t-shirt business, just so you all know that.
Right. They're all humorous, most of them inappropriate.
And that's no humor, Jill, is it?
And isn't it great that some jokes fit better on a t-shirt than coming out of your mouth?
Yes. Letting other people put their context on it, right? I'm curious, Stephanie, I saw you unmute a while ago. Was there more you wanted to share?
I was just thinking that when Solveig said what somebody finds funny tells you something about them, I was immediately also thinking about if they're safe or not. Because I think the most unsafe I feel is when somebody's like, geez, it's a joke, lighten up. Like that is the most unsafe kind of person for me. Because it's just dismissive of people's humanity and experience.
And judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I love, Jason, the picture that you and Solveig have of the author in the beginning,
Of Bell
because
Hooks? Oh, the author of the book?
yes, because he looks fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that there's a puppy. I thought of Sylvia right away. I thought, oh, Sylvia's loving this picture too. But do you all have that same impression? Like, do you feel humor radiating from that depiction? I don't know. Can you put that picture up again, please? Or did
Yeah.
you already close that down?
I did, but it just takes me a second to pull it back up.
I've been fascinated by the humor that he has put in all the chapters.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how thorny the discussion is, he has a humorous way of looking at certain aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. Almost there, Jill. There you go.
Seems like it's a New York second, Jason.
It is. I did live in New York for a little while. It's funny because when I was looking for photos of him, that's the only one I could find of him smiling. Now, they were all pictures taken by others, so I didn't find like any headshots or anything. So this just happened to be one that I thought, yeah, fit well with how he writes or how I perceive he's writing the book.
100%. There's just like a laughing spirit that permeates him. And I love that picture.
Well, and speaking of safe people, like to me, it's also like not just humor, but how do people treat like the less than? So like animals, nature, right? Like I think of, yeah, in a similar way.
Connecting grief and laughter is something that I'm experimenting with in a couple of weeks. My husband died very unexpectedly, although not suddenly. So it was 2 months, not a heart attack that took him, instantly. Well, he specified in his end of life instructions that there would be no memorial service, no celebration of life, no distribution of ashes with ceremony, etc. So, in the spirit of the letter of the law, as opposed to the spirit of the law, I'm giving him a roast.
I don't know your husband, but I feel like he would approve.
I think he would not really approve, but given that he can't get what he wants, it would be better than some other things.
I love that, Alice. I love that so much.
And if you serve roast at the roast, then you can always tell them that's what you meant.
Absolutely doing it. Roast beef, roast turkey, roasted corn, roast potatoes. Yep, all of it. It's happening.
Alice, that's fantastic. If you want to share the day and the time that that's happening, I will commit to prayer support around that, that the experiment goes the way you hope it will. And most of all, I hope it brings healing and joy to your heart and honor to your husband's spirit.
I'm kind of wondering, or wanting to maybe just open up a little conversation around kind of based on that quote that I put from page 167, where he says, humor, all Indians will agree. I thought that was a huge statement. Humor, all Indians will agree, is the cement by which the coming Indian movement is held together. I mean, first of all, what? Like, that is such a strong statement that it just kind of blew my circuits. And then when it says, when a people can laugh at themselves and laugh at others and hold all aspects of life together without letting anybody drive them to extremes, then it seems to me that people can survive. Okay, just I the power of the statements right there, it's just kind of blowing my mind. I'm going to lower my hand because that wasn't intentional. But it makes me I'd love to hear any other thoughts or reflections on how we might strengthen our whatever movements of justice that we are a part of, with humor, because clearly, like there's so much power in it, like that he's talking about, like it's the difference between survival and not. Right? So, like, is there any invitation? Is anyone feeling an invitation or a nudging around how we do that, or how it changes our own perspective on what we're doing and how?
That reminds me of several, like, I'm guessing either African American or Black activists talking about, Black joy and Black humor and Black laughter amidst all the things, especially around like George Floyd and several other things that happened early in the pandemic. How that was just as important as the activism and the advocacy, and because otherwise they couldn't survive because it's so much.
I think part of the problem is we don't agree on the humor. There's such division that what's humorous to one is not humorous to the other. There isn't that common sense of humor. I do agree that it's a coping, that when, to have humor, it's still with all that's going bad, to help cope with it.
So for me, when I read that paragraph, it sounds to me like it was just a way of life for that particular culture. So teaching others to have that discipline for me would be challenging. It's kind of teaching something new to learn or live into. This was a way of life for us. So we crack jokes, and whether we are good or bad, we just crack jokes. That's the way of life. To crack jokes among people who cannot relate to jokes or may be offended one way or another would be challenging. So I think it's all, we can plant the seeds, and we can hopefully encourage that to the best of our ability. But to that point, and this is where I get back to page 146, where he says, it has always been a great disappointment to Indian people that the humorous side of Indian life has not been mentioned by professed experts on Indian affairs. If that was a way of life, where are the experts? Didn't get it, and sometimes again, the perception of, and I will refer back to our coaching, is tell me a little more to get. Now, I am not saying that the expert don't know their feel, if you will, but there are times when we may overlook something. So again, learning experience. This is a great platform for this as we are discussing this particular book. But again, learning where there may be something as important as humor in this community that was overlooked by many who claim to be experts. So how do you teach old dogs new tricks, if you will?
You're mentioning that statement took me back. I've been trying to catch up the last couple of months of reading, and I just read the chapter about anthropologists, and that took me back to that chapter because it's like all this study, years and years and decades and hundreds of thousands of words written, and nobody talks about the humor.
Well, it reminds me of that quote that we do not see things as they are, we see things as we are. So if we are a humorless people, we cannot recognize the humor in another culture.
And it just really makes me think, what is humor, right? And because the surprise about that quote for me that you put out there, Solveig, was that it was humor that was pointed to and not love. And I'm like, the times that I feel the greatest love for the people around me often include big laughter, right? That's when the clarity of those bonds feel like they're almost shining so brightly I can see them with my eyes. And so maybe those things are not as separate as what I thought, right? Yeah.
I think about a couple sessions of laughter yoga that I led with someone that I didn't necessarily work well with. And I usually work well with most people, but this particular person was always a challenge for me. And when we laughed together, that challenge went away. We were able to work together and overcome. So in some sense, I do think that the love bond happens with laughter as well. So that would be just an example of experience that I had.
this also makes me wonder, is humor a way for white people that have transgressed so horribly to begin to actually see the reality? Like, is it a way for the veil to get lifted more fully off of the mind's eye to understand? And someone was alluding to that. Like, sometimes we joke about something and it's more than just a joke. It's like it's meant to be revelatory of something. And for some reason that awareness is hitting me too. And I am amongst the slowest to get things. I just need to name that, especially with COVID brain. Oh my gosh.
I think related, Jill, I mean, I'm thinking about I feel like humor is a great way to learn, especially hard things. So it's like an access point or can be an access point, especially if it feels like it's attacking me in some ways, right? Or my identity or whatever I was raised in. Um, but if it's done lightly, it um it doesn't negate the genuineness of that thing, if that makes sense. So it's not like making fun of it or of a people. It's approaching it with humor, lightness, etc., and then seems to give more people access. Or at least that's my experience. It's what I think about like with plays and musicals. There are often lessons scattered throughout those, and you access them through the humor, the music, the versus like a direct telling. Or you're seeing somebody else experience it, and then later you're like, oh, that might also be for me.
Well, I think humor also is a reset button. So if we're, really stressed about something or exhausted, humor can totally allow us to reset our body and our mind and our spirit.
Well, going to Makesha's point about coaching for a minute too, like I experienced that with some of my clients will come in like really heavy or really, and we end up laughing together about something, and then they'll make a comment like, "Oh, it feels totally different now." We didn't change anything. We didn't like fix the problem. It was just we got to laugh about something, and then suddenly, yeah, they feel like they can go on with their day for the first time. And I mean, I've had that experience with my coach too. And I mean,
Well, it seems,
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Jason.
I was just saying, I'm a white man. How bad can my problems be?
Well, and okay, so that's an example of something I was thinking about, which is, yes, in cultures that are fairly humorless, like it can be so fraught, right? But genuine self-deprecating humor, pretty safe, right? Like if it's genuine, right? If you're not like laughing at yourself in a harsh way, right? But like I'm just freely like, oh my gosh, I am a disaster today. Whatever it might be, right? If I can be free about that, like it's a way, like it's an entry point, into shifting some energy. And one thing that I've just how quite sure to say this, but I feel like I'm learning that from cultures that are wiser and longer and deeper and more mature, shall we say, that there's just a sense that there's just like more tools in the toolbox in terms of like how to relate to one another. So in some ways it's like humor has been discovered over many millennia to be a really effective healing tool, or a really effective communication tool, indirect communication tool, or a really effective like energy shifter, right? So it's almost just like, you know, what's an effective tool right now for our, you know, which we as coaches, right? Like this is part of how we talk about, like, what, you know, maybe a really direct question is not the thing right now, right? Maybe silence is the thing right now. So we've got some tools, but I feel like in the native culture that I've been like trying to learn about, more mature cultures, it's just like there's just such a depth of understanding of like, whoa, there's just like a whole bunch of tools that are really effective. Or maybe medicines, maybe that would be a different word, right? Like, what's the medicine for this moment? And humor is one of the medicines for many, many moments. Mukesh, were you raising your hand?
Yes. So as I guess I'm looking at a screen here, I may be the only brown skin guy around. Can I encourage us all not to be hard on ourselves as not expert, or we are people who don't have any humor, or as a nation? Because all community in my belief have goods and bads. We can learn from the good and encourage that, or we can learn from the bad and grow into it. So please don't be hard on yourself, because they are gifts and talents. I don't think they are mature. They may be mature in certain areas versus not mature in other areas. So don't be hard on yourself. As we are gathering, in my view, as we are gathering here, this is wonderful place of, again, learning. And I would encourage to be open to know other people and culture. I think that's one of the challenge for us. Well, for many who live in America and felt that this is the only culture in the world and it is the best culture in the world, and not allowing themselves to be exposed to all of God's people and creation. And so as we are learning and having these experiences, again, I'm using the word, don't be hard on yourself. But as you grow into this learning, hopefully you can hear and you can share, whether it's in your daily life with your neighbors, friends, families, whoever, and just be curious of other cultures. One of the things I tell people when I begin my sermon time is I share my humor or light side story. And I said, listen, if you don't get it, just laugh. Okay. Laugh with your neighbors. It's not the end of the world. Okay. And I think taking baby steps and said life is more important than just being, you know, just don't, you have the freedom in Christ already. Okay. So don't be hard on yourself. Give yourself that freedom you got from Christ to be who you are, but use these life experiences as a learning so that you can actually be blessed and felt blessed by God's creation through other communities, if you will. I thought I want just like to share that. Okay.
Amen.
Seeing our time already.
I know.
I was just about to say, is that so much I talk, everybody is quiet?
No, we're at our closing time. So so let's just do a quick round. If there's a word or a phrase or a powerful learning that you have from today, just go ahead and share it. We can do mutual invitation and just go around the circle. So Tammy, how about you? I'm just going to call on you. to start.
Lighten up.
Lighten up.
And Sobai. Not Sobai. Sylvia. I guess there is a Sobai. I had Sobai, my Norwegian friend, on my mind. Sorry.
Yep,
when
you got
I
one of those here
hear,
too.
when I hear her name, sometimes I hear Sylvia. Auditory problem. Well, my dog is now cough. She learned how to get in my lap. I guess just, being aware of each culture's humor.
Hmm.
How about you, Stephanie?
I think the humor is healing.
Hmm.
Stick with me. Sorry, Jill.
I'm just remembering and learning more deeply that humor is connected to hope
Hmm.
psychologically. Alice, please.
T-shirts.
Do you need them by the roast? Do we need to move them quickly?
Oh, there's that thought too. Huh. I survived the roast of the Bob.
What do you call it, Alice?
Oh, let's see who's left. Mukesh.
Thank you. So I was gonna say chillax, but life is redefined and accepted in humor. And I will call on Jason.
I think the part that's resonating with me is the humor as medicine. And so maybe I think noticing it different or approaching it differently than like not just what's going to make me laugh or what's going to make somebody else laugh, but how can this be medicine? And then Solvay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking that same thing too. The as humor is medicine and also, yeah, lighten up. Yeah, laughter is the best.
I have to go to my next thing. Good to be with you all. Thank you.
You, Tammy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Solveig and Jason, thank you for facilitating this space. As always, friends, as you leave this day, please know that you are seen, you are valued, and you are loved. And next week, we gather for supportive spaces with Jen and Carlton leading us. And we look forward to a month from now, we will be reading chapter 8, if I'm not mistaken on the numbers.
Yes, goes with the month if that helps.
Oh,
And I
That's
did.
how we kind of set up.
I just figured that out.
Oh.
Right? Ding! I love it. Yes.
And there are a number of events on the events page related to several more Indigenous, either led or learning about. So yeah, well, just because of time, we'll just say go check out the events page, and yeah, several things upcoming this month.
We
Thank
serve
you
a
all.
God of abundance. Yes, abundant opportunity to learn. Thank you for learning together.
Hey,
Bye, friends.
everybody.